Hi everyone, it's craftytinas. Today's video I'm going to give you guys an update on my craftytinas cinch log. I'm going to explain how to use the log to make sure that your holes that you punch with your cinch are centered. In other words, you have equal amount of space on both sides of your wire binding. Now this is in no way an official form. This is nothing to do with what the manufacturer has told us about the cinch. This is me writing down my measurements, how many holes I've punched, how to adjust the machine for the different notebooks that I've made. And I've made quite a few notebooks. If you've seen my videos, every video I show you how to line up your machine to punch the holes based on all the different notebooks I've done. This is not a guide for each of the videos. This is a guide for the different sizes you can do, or the different sizes I have done, how many wires or holes to punch, and then how to set your machine to get those measurements properly. Your goal is to always have the same amount of space on both sides, regardless of how big your wires are. Like, it doesn't matter the size wires you use, because the spacing is always the same. These are 2-to-1 pitch. That is the wires that the cinch requires. They're always going to be spaced out 2 holes per inch, because that is what this machine punches. You're not moving the holes, you're simply telling the machine to either punch the hole or not to punch the hole. So I've come up with a spreadsheet, and I have this spreadsheet out there as a PDF. It's on my Facebook page. The link is in the description. You guys can pop over, print this out, download it, do whatever you need to do. But this is my interpretation of how to set up the cinch to punch the holes. So in today's video, I'm going to show you how to read and understand this simple spreadsheet. And once you do a few of them, guys, you're going to say, okay, that's easy enough. I got this. So let's get started. I've cut some scrap paper. I make a lot of misprints, so I use my misprints to help me figure out how to get these calculations. And guys, to tell you the truth, I find the center, I kind of line it up and do guesses, but it's all trial and error. That's how I came up with all of these. Every notebook I made, I had to practice where to put the holes, because the instructions on this machine is very poorly written. It doesn't give you everything, and there's no way that you could actually have everything in writing that this machine can do. This is a work in progress. This is an update. I put out the initial one, had one minor update, but this adds a lot more sizes, and I've had requests for a specific format, which is the A5 and the A6. Now, I don't use those sizes, so I had never made a book using them. So I actually had to look up what size piece of paper that was in order to figure out the calculations. And again, this is my interpretation. This is to the best of my ability. This is what I use to line up my holes. And for the most part, all of mine have the equal amount of space on both sides. No matter how big the notebook or how few the holes, I have equal amount of space. When you're working with such small calculations, you're not going to be exact, but when it's all the way on the opposite side of the wires, you cannot tell if that's a millimeter off. So I'm getting as close as I possibly can and putting it in the spreadsheet for you. One disclaimer is, before you punch your pretty covers or your nice fancy papers or your flashcards, as this one is, please take a piece of scrap paper. This is a great way to use up your junk mail. If you get junk mail that has actual pieces of paper in there, especially if they're 8.5 by 11 pieces of paper, save them. You can use them for testing your machine. Please test it before you punch your pretty belongings, because I would hate to have someone tell me they made a really pretty cover, but my measurements had a typo and they made a mistake. So please, guys, please double check me. If you find a mistake on the sheet, please post it on the YouTube or on my Facebook page. I will correct it and give everybody a link so that they can get the new PDF. So let me explain the sheet. I love half pages. When I make my half page notebooks, almost all the time my pages are folded. I don't cut my pages. I take a full sheet of paper and I fold them. So I have incorporated that into the log. I wanted to put all these up here as examples to show you just how versatile this machine is. So this PDF that you can get on my Facebook page folds in half. That makes it 5.5 by 8.5, and you can put this in a notebook so you can hang on to it. Put some blank pages, some graph paper, and even some line paper in that same notebook so that you can make notes and journal what you have made and how it's worked and what you used. So here is the spreadsheet, and I've divided it into two parts this time because we now have more sizes. The first page, or the first half, is all notebooks, all punches that are 12 holes and under. That means you're only punching one round. Anytime you want to punch more than 12 holes on a single paper or notebook, you have to do a second punch. So the first sheet are smaller notebooks, or it goes all the way up to 9.5. They're smaller, they're bigger notebooks, but only have 12 holes. And that simply means there's only going to be 12 wire bindings. The second side, and I've even highlighted the information here for you, if over 12 holes, a second pass is needed, and then I had to tell you what to do on that second pass as opposed to the first one. And I've indicated it with a slash. So the first round would be 1 through 12, but the second one would be 1 and 2. So we're going to go through this. Let's start with something simple. Let's punch holes in a notebook that is 5.5. Now when I tell you this is the size, this is the side with the wire. So it's basically, where do you want your wire? Do you want your wire on top, or do you want your wire on the side? Whatever measurement where your wire is going to go is where you look on the chart. In this instance, this notebook is, forgot what size it was. This is a 3-inch notebook. So I would have to find 3 inches here. And if you'll notice, I have 2 3-inch notebooks because one has the number of holes is 4 and one has the number of holes as 5. So that's why they're on there twice. So once I know this is where I want my wires, and it doesn't matter if I'm holding my book this way or this way, I want my wires on the 5.5-inch side. I would go to the side with the wires column. That is the very first step. It's the very first thing you need to know before you make your notebook. Where is my wires going? Are they going on the side or are they going on top? Mine are going to go right here on the 5.5-inch. I come down to the 5-inch section, and there's a 5-inch with 7, a 5-inch with 8, and a 5-inch with 9. I'm sorry, 5.5 with 7, 5.5-inch has 8 holes, and 5.5-inch has 9 holes. I basically choose which one of those I want to punch. Do I want 7, 8, or 9 wires? The less amount of wires, the more space on each side. Let's go with the 9. We're going to do 5.5. We're going to punch 9 holes. That is the very next column. The third column says slider. 5.5, 9 holes. The slider needs to be 1 1/4. This is the slider. There's a straight, it says IN for inch, there's a straight line. I have written here 1 1/4. So on my machine, it needs to line up 1 1/4. Not sure how I'm going to show you this up close, but we're going to give it a try. The very top line, the first line on the machine, not on the slider, and then I'm going to go 1 1/4, and those two lines are going to line up. That is how I got my measurement on the spreadsheet. I'm going to make this a little easier for us. I highlighted every other line gray to make it easier for you guys to follow along, but you can also use a ruler to help. My 5.5 is going to have 9 holes or 9 wires. I'm going to put my slider at 1 1/4, which means I'm lining up that top line to the line that is 1 1/4. The next column says pushed. That simply means I want to push these buttons in. 1 through 9, I'm going to push them in. The next column is the number that are going to be pulled. 10, 11, and 12 are going to be pulled out. So I have 1 through 9 pushed in and 10 through 12 pulled out. So now my machine, based on this information, is ready to punch all of my holes. You would simply butt the left side of your paper or your cover. Doesn't matter what you're punching at this moment. If your cover or your paper is 5.5 and you want 9 wires, this is how you do it. You butt it up to the left and push it all the way forward. It has to touch the back and touch the slider to be exact. Once I have that in there, my pages or my cover, then I can punch them out. Now I have exactly 9 holes centered on my page. The way when I'm testing this, the way I check to see how close I am is I fold it, and if the last 2 holes do not leave me extra on the ends, if they line up perfectly, then I know I have the same amount of space on both sides. See how easy the chart makes it? If you follow the simple 5 columns, you will be able to punch the holes with no problem. Let's do it again, 5.5, but let's do it 7 holes this time. 5.5 is the side with wires. 7 is the number of holes I wish to punch. My slider has to be at 1 1/4. Down here, my 9 is also set at 1 1/4. So don't let that throw you, because I'm going to show you why. So I'm already set at 1 1/4. The next thing is I need to push in 2 through 8. So 2 through 8 is pushed in, 1 is pulled out, and 9 through 12 is pulled. 2 through 8 is push, 1 and 9 through 12 is pulled. I am only punching 7 holes. I'm going to do the same thing, put my paper in all the way to the back and all the way to the left. I'm going to punch or cinch. Well, I guess this is punching. When you put the binding in, it's cinching. Now I have fewer holes, more space, but even though I did the same measurement, it still works out exactly in the middle. And here's the difference. There's simply more space the fewer wires you use. Sometimes I want this look. Sometimes I want this look. There's so many options. I think that's why they did not give you any kind of guide, because it really is the sky's the limit. These are just a few of the sizes. Can you imagine if we tried to do every size piece of paper and every amount of holes that would fit on each page? I mean, eventually we'll get there on some of these little guys. But that's the difference in a smaller amount of holes compared to a larger amount of holes. You may be using up your spare wire and only have 7 wires that you want to use for this notebook. And if that's the case, you're not out of luck because this one has 2 extras. You simply use the one with the smaller amount of wire. And that's our 5.5. Now, what if we're making the cover and we want the cover to be larger than the papers inside? Again, another personal preference. They can be the same size, or they can be smaller than the covers. I like 1/4 of an inch smaller pages than the cover. What that would mean, I need 1/2 an inch difference. So I would want my pages to be 5.5, but I would want my cover to be 6. The problem is I want my holes to line up so that my cover is 1/4 of an inch on each end, not 1/2 an inch on one side. So if that's the case, I made this, my paper, which is 5.5, I made it with 9 holes. So my 6-inch paper, or cover in this case, needs to be 9 holes as well. So I go to the 6-inch column, 9 holes. It wants me to adjust my slider to 1.5. It wants me to push in 1 through 9. And it wants me to pull out 10, 11, and 12. Once I set my machine to match the log, I put to the left, all the way inside, all the way to the slider, and all the way to the back. That's important. If this is askew, your holes are not going to be in a straight line. They're going to be crooked, and your notebook will be crooked. So it's important to push it all the way. Now my 6-inch cover has 9 holes, and my 5-inch pages have 9 holes. And they... wrong paper, guys. And the actual holes line up, and there is my 1/4 of an inch on both sides. So now my notebook is going to have 1/4 of an inch on top and 1/4 of an inch on the bottom, where my cover is bigger than my pages. While we're talking about this, I am often asked, how much bigger does the cover need to be than the pages? You see here there's 1/4 of an inch on top and bottom, so your cover needs to be 1/2 inch bigger, top and bottom of your wires. However, for the right to left, you don't want 1/2 inch, you only want 1/4 of an inch, because you need no extra on the side that has the holes. You only need it on this side. You want it to have 1/4 of an inch on 3 sides. I hope that makes sense. If not, I do have a few videos talking about this, so please make sure you watch some of these videos. You'll get more helpful hints. But that is simply how, on these smaller numbers, you use this guide, this log sheet, to punch the holes. If you have more sizes that are not on this log sheet, I'm sure it's missing plenty. I tried to get all the normal ones, the ones that I've used. There's a 5.8 on here. That is an A5 landscape or an A6 portrait. And you have two. You have one with 8 holes and one with 10 holes. That is A5s and A6s. There's also down here an 8.3. That is the A5 portrait. So you have the A6 portrait and you have the A5 portrait and landscape. In the larger ones, you have an A5 portrait. So I was able to do the A5, A6 landscape and portrait for you guys. That took a little finagling because I could not figure out how to cut perfectly 8.3 or 5.8. So I put a piece of paper in my Silhouette Cameo, put in the correct dimensions, and let it cut the paper out for me. And then I just finagled with several sheets until I got it right. But let's talk about the ones that have 2 passes, because that's important. If you're going to do anything that has more than 12 holes, you're going to need to make 2 passes. This notebook, for instance, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 holes. That's a lot. 16's a lot. And as you can see here, I did 8.5 by 16. Anything that has more than 12 needs more than 1 pass. So let's do an 8.5. This is 8.5. This is the size. If you're going to do a half-page notebook, this is the size if you were holding it portrait. I don't know if everybody knows what portrait and landscape is, so let's make sure. Portrait is when the long side is on the right or the left. Landscape is when the longest side is on top or bottom. I learned that by remembering long and landscape both start with an L, and that's on top. So landscape is this way, portrait is this way. We'll move on now. This is an 8.5 piece of paper, and this is the side the spiral or the wire binding goes to. So I want to punch 16 holes on this piece of paper. 8.5 piece, 16 holes. My slider needs to be at 1 inch. And it says IN and in parentheses 1. That means it needs to go all the way in. The 1 matches up to the line. I want to push 1 through 12. Now you'll see a slash here and then 1 through 4. The 1 through 12 is the first round of punches. The 1 through 4 is the second round of punches. So we're going to put the paper in, and again, all the way to the back, all the way up against the slider, because if you don't line it up with the slider, there's no point in adjusting it. Now I have 12 holes, but I want 16. And in order to line up 4 more holes, they need to be in line with the rest of them. So the next section you see here is pushed 1 through 4, and you pull out, pull 5 through 12. My slider is not needed for round 2. So I open my slider so that it is out of my way. There is a button over here that has a tab underneath it. The object of that is to put that tab in your next to the last hole. When it's more than 1 page, it is so much easier to get the tab down. And you want it to lock down so your pages can't come out, but they can still go askew. You need to make sure you push this up to the top, just like you did when you were punching the 12. This gets locked on the next to the last. And according to our little guide, we need to push in 1 through 4, and we need to pull out 5 through 12. Open the tab, and now you have a perfectly lined up 8.5 page with 16 holes. And that's how you use the log for anything with more than 12 holes. You'll have a first pass and a second pass. And there are multiple sizes here. I don't make a lot of large books. The half page is usually as large as I make, so 8.5 is usually where I stop. But someone requested a 6x9, and they do it both landscape and portrait. So I already had a 6 on here, so I added a 9. And in case you wanted to make a cover, I added the 9.5. So you have a 6 and you have a 9. And I just noticed that we don't have a 6.5. We only have a 6 1/4. So I will work on, for my next update, having a 6.5. If there is something on this log that you don't see that you would like to use, please let me know either in the comments below or on my Facebook page. Make sure you tell me what size you would like me to figure out the numbers and get us a better system such as the log. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope it made sense. This is updated and it is on my Facebook page. Please pop over and grab it. It's in PDF format. Feel free to add to your own sheet or check back periodically. I will be updating this as we go. As people give me more sizes or as I make more books, I'm going to update it and provide it to you guys. I hope this was helpful. If it was, please comment below. If you need more explanation and want another video with more details, also let me know below. Thanks for watching. Make sure you subscribe and pop over to Facebook. And as always, guys, happy crafting.